everybody. How you doing tonight? Welcome to another installment of the Pucking Around podcast, our 59th episode. We got a really good episode for you guys tonight. The trade deadline is right around the corner. Just as we're recording this 4 days away, it'll be 3 when this is released tomorrow. But we got a great episode for you tonight. A little bit of a different cast than normal, but I'm Alex. I'm from the Gonna Flyer a podcast, and we got 3 awesome people here tonight. Starting with the man below me from Full Press NHL, an awesome dude that I met at the Four Nations tournament. Give it up for Jim Biringer. How you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, Alex, great to be here. Glad to be on a podcast. Yeah, awesome time, Four Nations. What a great event. What a great event for hockey. Glad to be here. Can't wait to talk some hockey, my wheelhouse. Just love the sport and love to be here.
Hell of a, honestly, that Four Nations tournament, man. I'm sure I'm probably beating a dead horse with this, but absolutely incredible experience. Was a great time there. Let me ask you this. How was the trip out to Ohio State? You were just at the Stadium Series with Detroit and Columbus. How was that experience?
Yeah, great experience. It was a college football atmosphere for the game, definitely 94,000 plus strong in Ohio Stadium. It was a great experience. They dotted the I. They scripted Ohio on the ice, which was really cool to see that in person. I've seen it a million times on television, but to see it in person was cool. The press box was great view, great game. Important game in the standings, right? Detroit and Columbus, and they played a great game. It was one of the better hockey games. You know, I was at Michigan for Detroit, and Toronto seems like Detroit always plays in these really good games. Outside the Michigan, the big house, 110,000. I got the second largest crowd, 94,000. But it was just an awesome experience. Saw so many people, met some cool people as well. So it was a great experience just to be there, to watch it all, take it all in. And, the stuff they did for Johnny Gaudreau was just amazing. And, couldn't ask for anything better. The Stadium Series, NHL. Like, a lot of people may poo-poo these outdoor games, but you got to go to them. They're for the regions, for the markets. But this one had a lot of national appeal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Honestly, and with everything that happened with Johnny Hockey, it just added that much more to it. This had to been – usually there's been a lot of, misses with some of these outdoor games, but I don't think this was one of them. That just having the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry added into the NHL – with Columbus and Detroit, everything that happened, as I just mentioned, with Johnny Hockey, a really competitive game, a game that meant a lot for the standings in general. It was the 2 teams currently in the wild card position, as you just mentioned. So we had a really good game there. Detroit looked like they contained most of the play, but Columbus ended up coming out on top, and that's what mattered. They got the big 2 points and just looked like an awesome time in general. But
yeah, it was. I mean, great. And then you mentioned the Michigan-Ohio State thing real quick. It's funny because Zach Werenski said he's putting it on hold. Meanwhile, Adam Fantilli said he walked around over the logo, the Ohio State logo a million times in the locker room. Dylan Larkin says the ugliest building he's ever been to. So, I mean, the Michigan guys don't like Ohio State.
No, they do not.
That I'll say. But good on Zach Werenski for putting it aside for at least one day. But most of the Michigan guys didn't really want to have anything to do with Ohio State. So that was really funny. But most of the guys would have said they'd rather have dressed in the visiting locker room than have to see Ohio State all over the place. Some of the Michigan guys. So, but they're like, hey, at least we won the game that mattered this year too.
Yeah, honestly, that like I said, animosity brings excitement to the game for sure. But not to leave my other 2 co-hosts in the ground. The man to my left from the Gonna Flyer a podcast. You know him, you love him, Mr. Eric Martino. Eric, how you doing tonight, brother?
Oh, not too bad, boys. Glad to be back from my little hiatus. I know I wasn't on the episode this week. Had a little family vacation plans. Went down some water slides. Had some great fun with the kids. And now I'm just ready. This is my favorite time of year, man. Trade deadline. I'm hyped. Let's go.
It's what hockey version of Christmas is. It's the calm before the storm. We're going to get some craziness over the next 4 days. And then last but not least, one of my brothers in real life. You know him, you love him. From the Talking Habs Media Group and of Hab Normals, Mr. Matt Norton. How you doing tonight, brother?
What's up?
What's up? I think
I'm doing well, man. Cole Caulfield's now a 30-goal scorer. Very, very happy about that. Lane Hudson got another assist. Very happy.
Calder for Lane Hudson. Cole Caulfield will score.
Oh, I like him already.
That you just got on Naughty's good side, call off the Lane Hudson right off the bat. That's all you needed to hear.
Wait, I mean, but is it wrong to say that? Because I mean, if you look what the kid's done all year, I mean, tell me a player that's been better.
As a defenseman, may I add.
Exactly. Because I saw somebody say this during the day, not to just sabotage this whole podcast, but just if you look at it, everybody cares about points when it comes to defensemen in the Norris Trophy. Why aren't we looking at points for what Lane Hudson's doing? As a rookie defenseman, remember, Mo Sider won the Calder Trophy with 50 points as a defenseman. So I'm just saying, I think Lane Hudson,
Hudson's on pace to blow. We're way past that.
Exactly. So, I mean, if it works for one, why can't it work for the other? I just say what Lane Hudson's done for Montreal Canadiens, he's got the Calder Trophy in my books.
He's been great so far. I can't even argue it. He's right now, it's him and Celebrini 1-2. Mitch Goff's probably a close third, and then maybe Dustin Wolf after that. Everyone else is pretty much out of it. But should be a good call to race right down to the end, regardless. But boys, we got some trades to talk about. We had a big trade deadline coming out. We had 3 big ones on Saturday, too. We had a little bit of a cold period after the Four Nations. You know, there was talk that the teams are going to be potentially participating in some big movement over that time frame, but it ended up being quiet. It would be mainly because of the success of the Four Nations being as big as it was, and no one wanted to interrupt that. That was, in a way, classy on the NHL's part, too. But now that we're ready to go, we had 3 big ones. Why don't we dissect those a little bit? The first big one that dropped on the early part of March 1st on Saturday between the Colorado Avalanche and New York Rangers sent Ryan Lindgren and the rights of Hank Kemp from the New York Rangers for defenseman Calvin DeHaan, the king of botching names, so bear with me, but Juuso Parssinen, and a conditional 2nd and 4th round pick in the 2025 draft. Jim, let me start with you. What do you think of this trade? Who do you think won? How do you think it benefits each team?
I think the Colorado Avalanche needed some depth on D. Ryan Lindgren is a good player. The Rangers, to me, had to be sellers. Look, there's some other podcasts that I do with some guys from New York, and we've talked about this for a long time, that the Rangers needed to let go of Ryan Lindgren. I've talked with people before the season even started. They didn't think they were going to bring him back because of what he could command on the market. He can still play well. His body's just beat up, but the problem is it's time for him to cash in, and I'm not sure the Rangers would want to give him the money just to be Adam Fox's defense partner. Jimmy Vesey, look, Colorado, their biggest weakness has always been, to me, has been depth scoring. Can they get enough secondary scoring? I said that a lot of people were on me before they made the trades for Lehkonen, getting Nichushkin, Kadri the year they won the Cup. I'm like, well, they don't have any depth scoring outside of McKinnon, when at the time Rantanen and all these guys. I'm like, well, what are they doing? But VC's going to play in their bottom 6. That's a fine ad. Parssinen for the Rangers, they've always liked that kid. They've always been looking at him. So they're getting younger. They're changing their identity, and that started back in the summer. They tried to move out Trouba. You saw what they did with Barclay Goodrow. They moved out Capo. Again, decisions made by Chris Drury, maybe late, maybe he's changing his mind. I personally didn't want them to trade Capo. I thought he had some life to give, but again, a revisionist history says if you move the kid line up from the 3rd line to be their full-time 2nd line, maybe Hito's still there, maybe Capo's still there, Lafreniere's playing with them, we'll see. But look, Hito and Capo are doing great things in their new homes. But the Rangers, they also got a 2nd round draft pick. I think that's the big thing out of this, is they got a 2nd round draft pick that they didn't have before. You can either use said draft pick, draft a player, or use it to get something else. And I don't think they're done. And look, I'll say it now. I think, Riley Smith's going to be a guy that's going to be gone. Where he goes, put in the usual suspects. But he's going to be traded because he's been out for the 2nd game because of roster management. But I thought it was a good trade for both teams.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? One thing to notice about this is the Rangers are likely going to end up losing their first-round pick this year to Pittsburgh with the trade that they made to acquire JT Miller, which ended up eventually getting moved Pittsburgh's way. So, it doesn't hurt to get that extra draft capital, too. The Rangers aren't out of the playoff hunt. They're only 2 points back. But, with the cluster of teams that are currently battling right now, there's like 7 or 8 teams battling for 2 spots that are within 5 points of the second wild card. There's going to be a lot of teams in the mid to high 80s that are on that pace that are likely going to miss the playoffs. So it doesn't help to get some extra draft capital in that situation, too, in case you miss the playoffs and it ends up going up a little bit. But, yeah, for sure, I look at this for the Colorado especially. You mentioned depth scoring, too. Casey Middlestad's a name that has been mentioned a little bit in trade rumors. Especially now that Rantanen's gone and Marty Nate has been inserted into the lineup. We'll be going over that trade a little bit later today. Jack Drury and Ross Colton have been decent bottom sixers for them as well. But as you mentioned, they needed some good defensemen. And I think a guy like Lindgren will help one of their bottom pairings. He'll probably be inserted onto the third pairing more likely than not. And, it takes the load off that he had playing on higher minutes with Adam Fox. So I think that's going to help him a bit now that because Kel McCarr and Devon Taves are going to be taking the top pairing. They're not going anywhere, obviously, off that line. But you look at Colorado right now, I think that is going to definitely help them defense-wise. Ryan Lindgren has had issues this year. As you mentioned, he's been banged up. He's not quite had the season he's had prior years. But a fresh start in Colorado, I think, could definitely do him wonders. Nordy, how about you?
Yeah, on the Necas trade, right?
No, we're on the Lindgren, Colorado and New York trade.
Oh, right. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of trades. No, yeah, no, I like what Colorado's doing. I think the Rangers are kind of sort of slipping into full sale mode. Like they're at a weird spot, but we'll see what happens. But I do like this move a little bit more for Colorado than I do the Rangers.
So what specifically do you like it for Colorado? As in just adding the depth defenseman, or just
no, you can never go wrong with adding depth on the back end.
How about you, Eric? What do you think about this trade?
No, I like this for Colorado. I'll be honest. Also, I don't think they're done. I think they'll probably try and add a few more pieces. But look, Colorado's defense, man, with Josh Manson out, plus they lost Bowen Byram last year in the Middlestad trade. Look, their bottom pairing was not up to snuff, and they're really just running 3 defense pretty much most of the season with Josh Manson out. So, and look, for Liljegren, like he played big minutes in New York. At least now he could be placed like further down the lineup, either second pair or third pair, depending where they play him. And look, I think he'll thrive. I think with limited time, with taking away some of those minutes that he was getting he'll just be a better player in the end. And look, if Colorado wants to compete for another cup, they needed to fix that defense. Like, look, since the beginning of the season, they've been tinkering with their team. Like, they're not afraid to make moves, man. Like, look, they did not like what was going on in goal for them, and they shipped both of those guys out and brought in 2 whole new guys with Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, right?
Wood brothers.
So yeah, and look, Jimmy Vesey, like, look, injuries happen, and look at Colorado. Like, at one point, remember, like half of their team was injured. So you just bring a guy like Jimmy Vesey in, like he's got some experience. He'll fit in your bottom 6. Look, he's not a big time goal scorer or anything. He's not a big time point producer, but like, look, he's a good, solid depth player, and that's what you need. That's what I've been saying this. I say this all the time. That's how you win cups. You don't win cups with only elite talent. You win cups with depth. That's what you need in the playoffs. And a guy like Vesey, man, like he'll definitely help them. But like I said, I don't think Colorado's done. I think they're still trying to upgrade the 2C position. If they could maybe trade out Middlestad for someone else, that would be an upgrade. I think they would be definitely up to it. But we'll see. This is, I think, a start, and I think there's still more to come from Colorado.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I never understood the Byram Middlestad trade. I never thought Middlestad was the 2C for them. And they're finally realizing that he's not a 2C for them. At times he showed he was a 2C. But at other times he's shown he's maybe just a 3C, and they need a 2C ever since Nazem Kadri left. They just don't have that 2C, and I agree with you. I don't think Colorado's done. I think that they're going to be doing something.
I honestly wonder if a team like Colorado makes sense to go after a guy like Dylan Cousins. I know he has a lot of term left, big cap hit, so it's obviously a risk. But, a guy like that, it's just the Buffalo Sabres plague where guys who leave Buffalo that get that change of scenery end up working out. I wonder if they're knocking on the door potentially of a Dylan Cousins trade, or if they're looking for more of a short-term move.
I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I think it's a good play for them, but the problem is what's going back. Like, I think they're going to want something back, and I don't think they're going to take Middlestat back in that deal since they already sent them out because they already knew what he was. So you have to see what you have down the middle in terms of what they're going to want who could fill that position. But, I mean, it's a good idea, but I'm not sure, like, if the pieces would work because Buffalo doesn't want futures.
Yeah.
Plus,
it's interesting we bring up Buffalo, too. There was a report that their general manager, they, as you just mentioned, they want to get NHL-ready talent, but the reluctancy to move, it sounds like Buffalo might not be as active as we first thought. What do you think of that report?
I mean, look, that's what they want to do. They want to get, they want NHL talent. They don't want picks, but they may have to move with it. Look, it goes back to everything with Vancouver, right? If you're going to move out Elias Pettersson or JT Miller, you're not winning that trade. Unfortunately, you're not going to win a Dylan Cousins trade until the summer. But I believe Eric wanted to say something after I made a point about what was going on with Dylan Cousins in Colorado.
No, I just want to say quick that I think Colorado would be looking for a more like veteran center or more like I don't think they would take a chance with like a Dylan Cousins who's really been struggling for 2 straight years now. If they want to win a cup, I think they would want some like now. I'm saying at the deadline they would want something like a bit more established. So I don't know if a Dylan Cousins would really make a lot of sense for them. One crazy thought I had like a while back would be, would they entertain maybe trying and trade for Nazem Kadri, get Kadri back, like send Middlestat and a pick or a young player back for him. I don't know. I was like some crazy thing that just popped in my head a while back, but I don't think it would happen. But like I don't know, just a little curious.
I mean,
I wonder, honestly, if they would be interested in Brock Nelson, too. I mean, short-term guy, up there in age, but he's still having a pretty good year.
That's a good fit. I mean, the thing is with Kadri, though, like, if that happens, I think it would be summer just to make the money work. I don't know if they could do it now. The guy I think they could do now, short-term fix, here's one for everybody. How about Ryan O'Reilly?
I like that. Not a bad move. Nashville's looking to shed some cap and get rid of some of these contracts, so that actually wouldn't be a bad. How many years does he have left of term? I don't know Ryan O'Reilly's contract off the top of my head.
He's got 1 year left after this one.
Okay, so that's actually a pretty good deal for them. You get a guy who has 1 year left of term, so if it doesn't work out, it's someone you can get rid of, probably potentially swap it next year. But I think Ryan O'Reilly would be a good fit there. He still plays a very good two-way game, so I wonder – maybe a change of scenery could do him wonders. What about you, Nordy? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but yeah, I don't know.
You know,
what I need to kind of read more into.
I gotcha. Well, anyone got any closing thoughts on this trade before we move on?
No, I think it's a good trade for both teams. Like I said, I think it benefits both teams down the stretch. Both teams get what they need.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think just the Rangers are just gonna try and strip all of like that, get rid of all that loose change on their team right now. All these guys with like expiring contracts or guys they don't want. Like, look, they're not gonna strip it down completely because they're still trying to compete for a playoff spot. But look, they're gonna load up on some pieces and maybe try and make some moves in the offseason.
I hear you there. So we had 2 other trades happen. The next one, not quite, I probably would say is the smallest of the 3 trades. The Minnesota Wild acquired Gustav Nyquist from the Nashville Predators for its second-round pick in the 2026 draft. Me personally, I thought this was probably a pretty even trade. Gustav Nyquist is 35 years old. I think he's on an expiring contract. having an okay year. I think he's got 9 goals and 12 assists off the top of my head, 21-point season. And, you got decent value for him. A second-round pick for a guy who's probably more of a third-line guy at this stage of his career isn't too bad for him. 2026 is also reported to be a little bit deeper of a draft than last year. So I look at this situation right now, and I feel like this benefits both teams, where Minnesota gets some much-needed bottom 6 depth where they could get a guy who's probably on about a 15-goal piece this year to potentially help give them some back-end scoring help if need be. And Nashville gets rid of a contract. Barry Trotz tries clean this up a little bit, gets a little bit of draft security. I thought that was pretty good value for Gustav Nyquist to get a second-round pick for a guy who's probably more of a third-line guy at this stage of his career. What do you think? Maybe even a fourth-liner, depending on who you ask. I think he's probably about a mid-end third-liner. But, Eric, I'll throw this one to you. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it was a pretty decent trade. I thought maybe he'd go for a third because he because of age, because he's struggled a bit this year. I was a bit surprised he ended up getting a second, but look, if that's what the market says, that's what the market says. But look, Minnesota's facing a lot of injuries right now with Ek out and with Kaprizov out and Hartman suspended, and anyway. So look, they need to add the guy if they want to keep in the playoff race. They gotta bring in some guys that can at least play some minutes and maybe put up some points. And look, Gustav Nyquist 2 years ago had a pretty good season. Look, he had 75 points in 81 games like just last season.
Yeah.
This season not going as great, 21 and 57. But then again, who the fuck isn't struggling in Nashville right now?
Poor Steven Stamkos, man. If we're on the subject right now, he's on now a 13-game pointless streak. Oh my God, this poor guy is snake bitten right now.
Yeah, so look, I could see Minnesota making like another little move like this, bringing like another maybe veteran player, maybe like a Riley Smith or something, just to because I don't see them going big this year with all the injuries they're having, plus with the cap constraints that they have this year. Next year it's going to open up, so I could see Minnesota being a player next year. But yeah, I could decent trade. I think he'll help them in the short term, and yeah, good for Nashville getting a second.
What about you, Jim? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, it's a good trade. I liked it. I think there were 2 teams in on Gustav Nyquist. Columbus was another team. I talked to some people before the trade went down when I was in Columbus on Friday, and they had linked him to potentially reuniting there. That would have helped them up front because Columbus is looking to add a forward, and he would have fit what they were doing, but maybe they just didn't want to give up a second rounder. Maybe the price tag was too high. Maybe they just didn't feel he was a fit. They want to bring somebody in that could fit that chemistry what that team is doing, the bonding that they have. I think it's also a pivot by the Minnesota Wild, knowing that their probably number 1 target, Brock Nelson, is probably not available. I think a lot of people figured that Nelson in Minnesota would make the most sense, but probably, everything that's going on with the Islanders. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it just feels like, Nelson was kind of off the board, and they just decided to pivot and go to Gustav Nyquist, which is a fine ad. And again, you can't have too much depth, but with the interest that they have, it's just a nice, solid ad. And, look, Minnesota retains some salary, but it's okay. It's going to come off the books anyway. Yeah. And, with Nashville, I think, look, they're just stripping it down. They're going to try to get younger, try not to mess up their young kids again. And maybe, you never know, maybe they move one of the guys they brought in the summer. You never know.
And since we're on the subject real quick, I am very surprised that Lou Lamoriello really wants to bring back Brock Nelson at this age. Why not get? I can't
believe Lou Lamoriello still has a job.
No kidding. Yeah. I don't understand why he is so hell-bent on considering extension for it.
All right, you guys want to – all right, so I followed Lou for a long time, right, being in New Jersey. He was great pre-cap. Yeah. Like, he everything was fine.
Great.
Post-salary cap world, he can't understand it. He still operates like it's the old days. When the Devils went to the Stanley Cup final in 2012, he should have got younger. It was just a run, but he's like, I got to bring veterans back. We're only a couple games away. When the Islanders went to back-to-back conference finals, yes, a lot of people said they could go to a Stanley Cup final, but if you look at it, they were rested, short season, older team. So they were able to do that. Once it became 82 regular season games again, it was tough. They missed the playoffs. Yeah, they just get in. But he believes if you can just get in and with these veterans. And the thing with Nelson is Nelson, when Lou got there, was an unrestricted free agent. They gave him a longer-term deal. He really likes being on the island. I don't think he really wants to move. So I think if Lou offered him a 3-year deal, I think he'd take it. But the guys like Palmieri should be moved. Pajot should be moved. But I know it's not going to happen because that's not his MO. He doesn't believe in the word resell. He doesn't believe in the word rebuild or retool. He doesn't do it. Like, he just doesn't do it. Because
like my old GM.
Yeah, right? Was that Bergevin, right?
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was that's tough. I mean, I saw, by the way, off topic, I saw Bergevin. Looks like he can still play, be honest. He's in great shape, that guy.
How old is Bergevin now?
He's yoked.
How old is he?
What is he, like, in his 50s or something?
God bless him. That's awesome to see. But, yeah, Lou just isn't committed to a rebuild. I don't understand. The Isles prospect pool, I mean, they got Cole Eiserman this year, which is a nice ad. Newburyport, Massachusetts native ad, mind you. Pretty cool. But I just don't understand why he's so hell-bent on sticking in the middle and not committing to a full-scale rebuild. I don't understand it.
Because it's Lou, and that's what you say.
It's Lou Lamoriello.
It's Lou. Like, this is what he does. He doesn't do this. Like, this is what he does. Like, that's the issue, right? Like, that's why I said when he was in Toronto, he wasn't the GM. It was a GM by committee. He just was there to be a figurehead. And you can clearly see that what he did at his tenure at the end of New Jersey, you go look at the moves that he made. He set that team back. He's doing the same thing with the Islanders. It's the same thing. And, you have players that teams value, and you can get picks, and you can get younger, and you can retool real quickly on the fly. But no, I believe in what I have, and I'm going to stick to my guns. And that's why there's a little friction in that building.
Yeah, and like
when it rains, it pours in Isles land. Nordy, what do you think of the Nyquist trade, by the way? Gustav Nyquist for a 2026 second.
No, I like this for Minnesota a lot. I mean, like you guys have said, obviously with the injury to Kaprizov, they needed a winger, but I think even, if he comes back, I think having a guy like Nyquist, kind of on the second line wing spot is great depth. I think Gustav Nyquist can still play very good hockey. I like this trade a lot for Minnesota. I really, really do.
He's had a bit of a down year, but as it mentioned, he is just coming off of a 75.
He was on the Predators, bro.
And who would have thought the Predators be this bad this year?
Yeah, no kidding. That was
our buddy Cam had them in the Cup final.
I was going to say, one of our co-hosts, Cam, picked them in the Cup final at the beginning of the year. You want to talk about the whiff of the year?
Oh,
no
centers. I thought they'd be at least a playoff team. I didn't think they would be a Stanley Cup final, but I thought they'd at least be in the playoffs.
I thought they
were
too,
right? Like they should have been.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the problem is there, but
it's
like
just a
Stammer, I think, is gone, 17, 18 games pointless now? Something crazy
13.
like that?
13 right now for Stammer.
Is it 13? Yeah, I know it was in the teens. But it's crazy. Like, is he washed? Like, are there old veterans just washed? I don't know.
I think here's the issue here. Like, I know this was not on topic, but to me, I think Nashville, go back. So if you guys look it up, go back to when Drury and Scott Gomez signed in New York. It's two the same player, two playmakers. They need a goal scorer and a playmaker. Nashville does the same thing. I'm not saying Marchessault's on Stamkos' level, by no means, but you got two of the same type of player in goal scoring. There's no real facilitator there to pass them the puck. You have two goal scorers here. I know Forsberg could be that guy, but to me, I think Stamkos look, I know he signed a contract. I just don't think he wants to be there. Like, I'm just being honest, not like from anybody I've talked to in Nashville, but it just doesn't feel like he wants to be there. His mind is still in Tampa, that he was rejected and he wasn't there. It may take him a year to adjust to everything, but I think if you get him out of there, I'm going to tell you, I think you see the old Steven Stamkos.
Would you believe me if I tell you I don't even think Stammer's their worst contract right now? Because that Brady Shea contract is aging like curdled milk. Oh, my God. This guy was brought to be an offensive defenseman. He played second pair minutes, and then Nashville's been playing this guy a lot on the top pairing, and he's just not that at this stage of his career. He's got 21 points in 60 games, and he's just been not the player we saw in Carolina. That you want to talk about a team that just put themselves to a bunch of bad contracts. I don't know. Trott's got some work to do this offseason, that's for sure.
Oh no, yeah, but
Yeah.
look, what it looks all nice when you make these signings, all Stamkos and Marchessault and Brady Shea and whatnot. But like also at the same time, already I think last season Nashville already overachieved a little bit. Like after they hit that, they took that run after that whole U2 thing with when they couldn't go anymore and whatever. And I think like it was fool's gold. Like they didn't have the team to. They weren't that good. They weren't as good as they were playing. And then you add a bunch of these older veterans and like good on them. They're quality players. But my biggest issue is what they did this season is they have no center. They have who's the like I like Ryan O'Reilly's a great player, but Ryan O'Reilly was never a number one center in his career. He's always been a 2. And look, then Novak. Oh, maybe he's gonna take a step, but like you can't you just hopes and dreams. These are just hopes and dreams that you're betting on. So it's like I didn't think they would be this bad, but like I didn't think they were going to a cup final or anything. But like who knows? Maybe we'll see what they'll do in the offseason. Maybe they'll try and fix something, get ready to one of these guys. But yeah, like you said, Alex, man, that Brady Shea contract is looking.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. That's awful, and not to mention like. You look at it, maybe they just messed up the room because that room came together after that canceled YouTube trip. And let's be honest, if we're really being honest, they probably should have gotten to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs because they dominated that series and lost to Vancouver and probably shouldn't have lost to Vancouver. Like
they got goalie.
Well, yeah, but did they get goalied or did the fact of the matter is you allow Vancouver to score 3 goals on 15 shots every night?
Yeah, that too.
Like, I mean, you should win a series when you hold the team to 15 shots a game.
Yeah. Vancouver just that was again, it was a difference in goaltending, I guess is a better way to put it. They got killed in net, and that ended up being the difference. And that makes me wonder why. I mean, I like Saros. I think he's still a really good goaltender, although he's had a bit of a regression this year. Still think he's good.
They picked the wrong guy. They picked the wrong guy.
Yeah, they should have sold Saros high. I agree. But it is what it is now. But we got one more trade to go through from Saturday, and this is, in my opinion, the biggest of the 3. Florida dropped a big blockbuster on us later in the evening when they acquired Seth Jones and a 4th-round pick in the 2026 NHL draft from Chicago for goalie Spencer Knight, first in 2026, and I think Chicago ate $2.5 million of said cap. So let me start with you, Nordy. What did you think of this trade? Me and you talked about it a little bit when it happened, but let's hear from what you have to say now a couple days later.
Yeah, look, I mean, honestly, I like this trade a lot for both sides. I actually kind of like it a little bit better for Chicago, and here's why. First and foremost, you're now only eating $2.5 million instead of $9 million for the next, I think, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
You get, a potential kind of. Not franchise, but you kind of get a potential, starter for the future in Spencer Knight. I think Spencer Knight's a great goaltender, and he still has some untapped potential.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you offload that, and you get a 1st-round pick, whether it's 26 or 27 remains to be seen. But it's never a bad idea to bring in capital like that. But again, I think the biggest thing was getting that albatross of a contract off the books. With the cap going up $2.5 million is pennies on the dollar. I mean, that's nothing. For Florida, they do bolster that defensive depth. I think Seth Jones could be a really good facilitator from the back end for them. But again, I think Chicago wins this trade.
I gotta agree. I think Davidson made up for that original trade he was part of with Colorado and Carolina, because I don't think Chicago originally did enough with the Rantanen and Necas trade, because all they got was their own 3rd-round pick back. I think Davidson made up for it a lot. I do think that it was kind of a win for both teams, but as you mentioned, Nordy, I do like it better for Chicago for the sheer fact that, as you just mentioned, they get a good goalie, a young goalie that they can rely on. It's definitely an improvement for what they had in Mrazek.
Oh, yeah.
And they also, as you just mentioned, they only have to eat $2.5 million compared to $9.5 what they had before. And with the cap going up about an average of about $7-8 million over the next 3 years consistently, that's going to be maybe like 2% of the cap if that, when all's said and done. And Chicago's still got a lot of work to do. They're not competing anytime soon. They got a few more drafts to get. They got to get some winger help through the draft. I think that do they feel like Oliver Moon or is there 2C in the future? That remains to be seen. They got to get Bedard some actual help too. I mean, Levchinov should be eventually coming out. He could be a potential number one defenseman. Whether he's a franchise demon we'll see. But I do like that Chicago actually got some pieces for the future, and in my opinion, definitely did better than what they did in their first trade that they were involved in the year being a broker. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think I like it for both teams. Look, Florida need a right shot defenseman to go with Aaron Ekblad. And it's potential that it could be the replacement for Aaron Ekblad if, because there's been a lot of talk going back to last summer that maybe they don't extend him. We'll see at the end of the year. I'm still not sold on it, but you never know. But I think that the thing is if you get rid of Ekblad, is Jones, is he a number one or is he fit right in being a number two? And I think on this team, he's a number two. And I think Ekblad's still a good player for them. They'll just have to make a cap decision before guys' contracts kick in with no move and no trade clauses and decide what's best for them to keep running this thing back. Look, getting $4.5 million off your salary cap for a backup goalie is huge. You have Drieger in there, Bobrovsky's there. I don't know if Spencer Knight was going to be the guy there. That's the thing. Like, Bobrovsky still got a few years left on that deal. He's played good, but he was never the guy that they thought he was going to be. And remember when he got drafted, they had just signed Bobrovsky to that contract. It's like, all right, you drafted him, and then he signed his goalie. I'm like, all right, so what's the plan here? And you bring in Jones, great player. He still can eat some minutes. He's going to play top four. He might be better than what you had in Oliver Ekman-Larsson last year.
Yeah.
And now he can play power play. He takes some load off Aaron Ekblad. This team wants to take a run at it, and now they have more money to spend because of Matthew Tkachuk being on LTIR, which we all kind of figured was coming with the way he played at Four Nations and what we were hearing that, it wasn't good. Let him rest. And I love the line for Paul Maurice. It was this time last week around in the morning. It was Monday. He's like, well, he's going to play for us this season. Yeah, but bro, the season is playoffs or regular season. You didn't specify both, but I do know that the playoffs include this season. So he'll be out the rest of the regular season. We'll see him in the playoffs.
More likely than not, yeah. What do you think, Eric?
You know what? This one actually kind of caught me by surprise because I'm like, I know that there was rumors out there about he came out and said it himself, right? Seth Jones, that he didn't want to, pretty much basically said trade me. I just really didn't think who the hell is gonna pick up that contract, especially at this point in the season. So I was actually a little surprised that someone actually bit, and good, honestly, good for Florida. Listen, they won the cup last year, and then their defense got completely decimated. Montour left, and Ekman-Larsson left. So they pretty much just been not running one pair, but it's clearly not a championship defense that they were having this year. So now look, they got Chicago to eat some money. So now they got him at $7 million. And like Jim said, it's insurance. It's also insurance just in case they don't re-sign Ekblad. And I've always kind of liked Seth Jones. He's never my favorite, but I think he could be a top pairing defenseman. He did play big minutes in Chicago and did play big minutes even before that in Columbus. So in case Ekblad does leave, they have a replacement. So I really like this move for Florida. And for Chicago, they got rid of a guy that didn't want. Look, you don't want to be there. We'll get rid of you. So they got rid of him, and they brought in a goalie that maybe could be, or at least a worst case, tandem with the other kid that they have right now that I heard they really like, is Soderblom or something. So look, they got a good goalie, and they're building that thing up, right? So now they got some good young defensemen coming. Chicago's got to just add a little bit more up front to surround Bedard with some legit players. So we'll see. But I like this. I like this move for both teams.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. Honestly, when I look at this too, one thing that really stands out to me, I think this pretty much marks the end of Aaron Ekblad's tenure in Florida when it's all said and done. I think he likely does end up walking. I'd be very surprised if he ends up re-signing with Florida, because now you've got that guy that's at least set with term for the long term. I mean, Florida could bring him back, but I think it would have to be at a reduced rate. I don't think Ekblad's going to want to take a cap reduction at this point, especially with him already having his cup. So that's one thing that definitely stands out to me with this trade is I think this likely means Aaron Ekblad is going to hit free agency.
I mean, that would be big for them. I mean, again, the only way you keep him is you move up. Like, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but you look at it, and I've talked to some people, and they're like, if you do try to keep Ekblad, you may have to lose the scoring that you had when you've given when you already gave Verhaeghe that new extension, but his no trade protection doesn't kick in until July 1st. So, and if you want to keep Bennett too, that might be a player that you may have to move to shed some salary. Even
I
with
wonder
the cap
with
going
Bennett.
up.
He's another guy I have a feeling that walks, but we'll see. What are we going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, even with the cap going up, like that's something that they look into.
Oh yeah, for sure. Does anyone else have any other closing thoughts before we move on to the big board? All right, so coming up next, we go on over the trades that have happened. We got a lot of guys that are still coming up that are likely going to be moved over the upcoming weeks. You know, Frank Seravellis' brand new big board came out earlier today. I think the best thing what we could do is right now go over the top 5 guys and see where they think they could land. So right now he has Brock Nelson at the top of his list. He looks like more of like a 50-50 guy, but he's probably the most sought out guy. And it's going to be moved. 59 games played. He currently has 41 points. Having a pretty good year as a legitimate 2C right now. 19 goals, 22 assists. He's a pending UFA. What's the noise you're hearing on him, Jim? Do you think he ends up resigning at the end of the day, or do you actually think he ultimately does get moved?
I think he stays. Like, I'm going to be honest. Like, I mean, look, Lou is so hard. I mean, sometimes you get information and then it changes. But I just think there's too much loyalty there, and I just don't buy that Lou's ever gonna do anything until he does it. And yeah, you could say all these guys are available, but I think Brock Nelson's gonna be a guy that stays, and if he does stay, the number 1 center comes off the board, and it raises the prices for other guys.
It really does. I mean, this is going to have a major ripple effect, and I think we'll probably get more on Brock Nelson over these upcoming days, because if you start seeing other guys get moved by Wednesday and he still is on the board, that makes me think that he is likely going to stay. I don't think he's going to be a guy that goes to the last minute. I think if he's going to get moved just to set the price and to set everyone's ideas, because everyone's not going to want to wait for the Brock Nelson shoe to drop. They're going to want to make their move sooner rather than later. So if he's someone that ends up being on the board still on Wednesday, I think teams could pivot to plan Bs and Cs. But
yeah, I agree with that. No, 100%.
What do you think, Nordy? What do you think about Brock Nelson? Do you think he stays or goes?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's knowing Lou Lamoriello probably stays. I agree with Jim. I think until Lou does something, like I don't believe a word he says.
For sure.
That's just how he is.
What about you, Eric?
I think he should go. Will he is the question. Because like, look, the Islanders, man, they are pretty much the definition of mid right now. Like that's what like. And the worst part is, like, I really like their goaltending. I really like their defense. It's their offense is just old and slow. Other than like Barzal and Horvat, right? So like the best thing for the Islanders to do is to sell off these guys like Brock Nelson and Palmieri. If you can get something, I know he still has term, but like Anthony Duclair or any of these guys, like try and recoup some picks, maybe even get some you don't even get picks. Maybe if you can get like a prospect or a player in return or something, and try and like rebuild that offense and start rebuilding that offense and retool your team. And then maybe in a year or two, you can actually be like a legit competitor, like go, because look, Sorokin's still young. I think Noah Dobson's a great defenseman, and like he's still young. You have him and Romanov, and you still have like the veterans in Polak and Palik. Like you're set up, your defense is set, your goaltending is set. Like Lou just has to like put his his friendships or his whatever aside and be like, listen, we got to do what's best for the team right now. And the best thing to do for your team is to trade Brock Nelson and to trade Palmieri, trade these guys, get what you can to try and rebuild that offense. And look, worst case scenario, you resign the guy at the end of the year, in the offseason, if you really love him that much, you know? So, like, no, the best thing would be to trade him. And look, I'm sure there's teams, like, personally, I don't know if they would have to figure out a way to make the money work, but I would, like, Carolina. Like, look, they took a big swing with Rantanen. And if they decide to keep him, you got to go big or go home. So bringing a guy like Brock Nelson to be your 2C, because Kotkaniemi is clearly not that.
No, he was not.
And like you have Jordan Staal, like look, he's a 3C at best. That's what he is. So they really need a 2C. So you know what? If you're Carolina, you're gonna keep Rantanen, go for the home run, man. Bring in a 2C, even if he's a UFA, just do it and see and go on a run. Because look, Florida's making moves, man. Tampa Bay looks like they're a juggernaut. They're coming back around. So if you're not going to trade Rantanen in Carolina, then you got to make another move, bolster that offense.
Yeah, I got to agree with a lot of that. You make a good point. Lou's got to put his pride aside. He's got to stop putting his loyalties out there and his friendships aside and just sell. But I mean, the fact that Noah Dobson was even in trade rumors was shocking.
That's still like, I think that's still in play, but I think Lou got wind of it and said, nope, we're not going to do it because like, that's what he does. Like if he gets a wind of something, I'm not going to do it. But I think like teams, not only Carolina, Colorado, Dallas, Toronto, Winnipeg, like teams like that could definitely all benefit from having a player like that. He's not going to New Jersey, so we can take that off the board because Lou's not going to trade him to his old team. Similar with Kyle Palmieri. Palmieri not going back to New Jersey. Reunion not happening. Sorry, folks. Like, I hate to be that guy, but Lou's not sending him back to his old team. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I don't think the Devils would want a 34-year-old. I'm just going to be honest. There's a big reason why they didn't give Marchessault the deal that he got in Nashville. I heard they were going to give him like 3 years. Similar to what they were going to give Toffoli. You know, they didn't want to go big. Like they didn't want to go like 4 or 5 years and like have no trade protection for all those years in case things didn't work out. So Lou was so stubborn, but you know, we'll see come Friday, but I think this is a big stretch for the Islanders, and if they lose both games, you know, he's got to really do some soul searching, but knowing him, he won't.
Yeah. Not wrong there. Speaking of New Jersey, one guy that I have heard interest in is a player of ours is Scott Laughton as a potential depth guy. He's currently number 2 on Frank Seravellis' big board. What are you hearing with him, Jim? Do you think he could potentially be on the move? Is this a guy that I'm hearing a lot of names with Laughton right now? Feeling like it's about a 50-50, especially after his Last Supper tweet, which, mind you, was awesome.
Album cover for Scott Laughton. Give him a Grammy for the album cover. That was great. That was excellent. Excellent time. Look, I've talked to some people. Definitely, Devils are looking at Scott Laughton for sure. Got a year left. Very reasonable contract, by the way. Like, really reasonable contract to get him in big. But the Devils have more concerns than that. They need goal scoring, too. Like, Brock Besser's a name out there. Did they look at Alex Tuck? Did they look at other places to try to find some goal scoring? There's just not a lot out there right now, and yeah, I think Laughton would be a good fit. I know the other guy that they're looking at from Montreal is Jake Evans, and a lot of guys have been looking at Jake Evans. Those are the 2 centers that they've been heavily looking at for sure. Again, the price tag for both could definitely high, especially Flyers for in the division. You know, because he's going to have to see another year of him with New Jersey if he gets traded there. So they're going to probably want to try to take something away from the Devils just because they're going to have to see him for a while. But it's a good fit. But with Jack Hughes injured and potentially out for a while, now you got to be like, all right, what are we going to change direction? How are we going to look? Like, we got to do something here. But they're definitely active looking for a center because they just don't have the depth there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The Jack Hughes injury throws things definitely into a loop because they already were looking for center help. And Laughton could play both the center and the wing. That's a good thing about him. He can play – he's more of a third-line guy. He can play on the fourth line, and you could even situationally play him on the second line. Wouldn't recommend it long term, but for a game or two, if you need it, like he could play there. He's got the experience for it. But now that the Jack Hughes injury put things into perspective, Devils could potentially be looking at a couple of guys for sure. What are some other teams you're hearing with Lawton?
Winnipeg for sure. Obviously, the obvious one everybody's talked about is Toronto. Do teams like, again, Colorado, do they look at Scott Lawton potentially for help down the middle? Dallas could look for help down the middle. Obviously New Jersey, Winnipeg, Toronto are teams that are definitely looking at him for upgrades down the middle because of what he brings.
For sure. Matt, what do you think about Scott Lawton? Do you think he ends up staying put, or do you think he ends up getting moved?
Again, I mean, it's a tough one. I can see him probably moving, though. I do think there are teams that could get desperate enough closer to the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Again, especially if someone like a Jake Evans, who I think is going to be traded by the deadline, if he ends up getting traded, well then, now Scott Lawton becomes kind of like the top, I guess, center available, if that makes sense. Because yeah, I mean, right now, like Lawton and Evans are really kind of the two centers that have been talked about a lot. So I think once one goes, the other won't be far behind, if that makes sense. And I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. But I do think he ends up being traded. I think Danny Briere should trade him, because should be able to get some good assets back.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, as Danny has mentioned, he is adamant on staying on that first-round pick line. Maybe a second and a prospect gets it done, depending on who the prospect is. Who knows? Eric, we talked about this a few weeks ago on Flyer. What do you think? Do you think has your opinion changed at all?
No, look, as long as Beer gets his price, like, again, we don't have to trade him. He's got another year. I think the best thing for the Flyers would be to trade him, get whatever assets we can, because look, it's starting to become, especially on the Flyers, it's starting to become a logjam in the bottom six. We have so many guys there, and we got guys coming up. So, if like Nordy said, let's say Lou doesn't trade Brock Nelson and Jake Evan goes, he is the top center. So if anybody wants him, they're gonna have to pay up. And like, is a first really that crazy for especially like because he has that extra year, and like he's not on the big number. He's at like what, 3 million. So it's a very digestible number. You're getting him for 2 runs, and like you said, the guy's a Swiss Army knife, man. He could play on the wing, he could play at center, he could play up your lineup, he could play the bottom of your lineup, he could play anywhere you want. He's a great penalty killer, and he brings an edge. Too. And like, he's not the biggest guy, but he plays with an edge, and he stands up for his teammates, and like he's a great all around player, and but like I said, like, Danny should stand pat. Like, if he doesn't get his price, you can always just trade him in the offseason or something. But I think I personally think he is going to get moved. I think there's a lot of interest, and I think somebody will eventually, hit the price.
It's sounding like it. There's a lot more smoke compared to normal years with him. And I think that picture shows a little more than we actually know. I think it's a great album cover for sure. But I definitely think there's more than the story tells for sure with that. Let's continue going down the list. Brandon Tanev of Seattle, currently the number 3 guy on the big board. 59 games played, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points. Pending UFA this year. What's some good landing spots for him right now?
I mean, look around the league, who needs guys like Brandon Tanev, and I think everybody is playing from Seattle. Yanni Gourde. I think you could look at Oliver Bjorkstrand. Definitely all their UFAs are available for sure in Seattle because they have to retool this team. Get what you can. Look, 33-year-old depth player. Look. Put the usual suspects in. Guys like Vegas, Tampa, Florida. I think he would fit Toronto. You could put him in Winnipeg. You can put him in Winnipeg. You can put him. LA might be able to use him. Like, there's so many teams. He's such a versatile player. he's a great fit for any team, and same with Yanni Gourde. He can go anywhere. He can play third line, fourth line, great penalty killer. We saw what he did in Tampa during those 2 cup runs. I wouldn't be shocked if Tampa takes another run at him again, just to bring him back. Part of that, like that line that they had with Goudreau, Coleman, and Gourde. I mean, I think there's a lot of players from Seattle that are available, and I think they're going to be in full sell mode come the deadline.
And I look at that Seattle team. They're very confusing. It's a team that looks like they're trying to push to be good right now, but it's just not working with them. I feel like that's a team that might need to reset things a little bit. They got a lot of older players in that lineup. I mean, a lot of that may have had to do with said, expansion draft. But Seattle looked like a team that was trying to make a swing 2 years ago, removed from a second-round appearance. And I don't know, maybe the Dave Haxtell stench hasn't worn off yet. You guys know how I feel about him as a head coach. But, Nordy, what about you? What do you think about potential destinations of Brandon Tanev? Me personally, one team I was looking at possibly. I know they just acquired Taylor Hall, but I wonder if Carolina would make any sense. But, Nordy, what do you think?
Sorry, my mic is muted by accident. No, I think you could probably lump in the usual suspects again. I mean, any of the contending teams would be looking for some depth. No one really stands out in particular to me. Mm-hmm. Maybe Toronto, maybe a team like Carolina, but again, it remains to be seen. But again, he's the type of guy again that could go to, any of the contenders out there.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Eric? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I honestly, any of the 16 teams that make the playoffs could use a Brandon Tanev. Like, it's pretty much, he's just that kind of player. Like, he'll bring energy, he brings physicality. He'll play on your fourth line, penalty kill, whatever. He's one of those guys. He'll do whatever he has to do, And like I said, any of the 16 teams that can make the playoffs could use a Brandon Tanev. So I don't know, Edmonton, maybe they could use a little extra physicality. I don't know. Toronto makes a lot of sense. But yeah, like Washington, I don't know. Like honestly, any 16. Like I said, any 16. He's just that type of player.
Actually, Washington is actually a nice fit for them. I think that would be a good fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a team that definitely could use a little bit more depth. Washington, I just wonder in general, because there was talks that they might not want to mess too much with the chemistry that's been going there right now. Because that team, we can all agree, has been probably the surprise of the year right now. No one expected Washington to be this good. And I think if they do add, it will be something small. And maybe a Brandon Tanev is something that could fit the lines for them. A good depth guy, big physical body, can kill penalties, as you mentioned, Eric. You're not getting the Brandon Tanev from Pittsburgh, obviously, but it's a guy that can still bring in some depth scoring, who's a guy who can play physical in the playoffs, who can wear down the opposition. You need players like that, especially when you're in a marathon like you are in the playoffs, where bodies and wear and tear are going to be big. I think a guy like Tanev would be a good fit in Washington, as you just mentioned, Jim.
Yeah, and then you look at the other guys there, like Gourde, not only Gourde, but Jamey Alexiak. Like, you can never have enough depth come playoff time. And, like, teams like Winnipeg could use it. Like Eric said, the 16 teams that we're seeing in the playoffs, those are places where, like, you could use a player like that. Like, look, you wonder, like, teams on the outside looking in could use a Brandon Tanev to get them in. You look at LA, I think that's a great fit for their bottom six, to be honest. I think they could definitely use a player like that, especially if they have to match up with Edmonton again. You could slow down guys with that kind of player. But I think Seattle's definitely going to be in sell mode come the deadline on Friday because, look, let's be honest, like, Ron Francis's job is probably going to be on the line. It has been. I'm not sure he gets that fifth year. He didn't get it with Carolina, and Seattle went to the second round of the playoffs a couple of years ago, and it just seems like they're mediocre, like the Islanders. They're the Islanders of the West, and they're just not getting better. And at some point, you have to just decide, okay, what we did in the expansion draft wasn't good enough, and we have to restart.
The Kings of Mid. I used to call the Wild the Leafs of the West. And honestly, that's a pretty good comp with Seattle being the Isles of the West. Just very, very mid. And just can't quite get to the bottom, but aren't good enough to really compete either, despite having such an old team for sure.
No, exactly.
So other names we got on the list. Fourth name, Nordy, you'll like this one. Jake Evans from Montreal. 60 games played, currently 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points. Very reasonable cap hit for him. Only 1.7 mil. He's a pending UFA. Go right back at this. Teams that make sense for him. Nordy, let me start with you this time. Since you're the big Habs guy here, who do you think makes sense for Jake Evans? Your mic muted again?
Yeah. I think a team. I actually have to look at the. I can't remember if it's Winnipeg or another team, but there were one or two contenders that actually had really bad penalty kills, and I'm just trying to figure out who they were because those two teams right off the bat would be perfect. Because I think Jake Evans honestly is one of the best penalty killers in the league.
Wild was one of them for sure.
And I believe that the team that I think would pay, potentially that first or maybe a second in a prospect, maybe overpay a little bit for him would be that team because he's a penalty killing machine. He scores a lot of shorthanded goals too, and he's a premier faceoff guy. I know usually doesn't get a lot of points, but he brings so much more to a team than just that. And so the Wild is one. Edmonton's got a lot of centers, but I think the Wild will be a really, really good spot for him if they. But I don't know what they have to kind of swing that deal. Winnipeg maybe. I know Winnipeg's been calling on him. I don't know who else, but again, some of the usual suspects. But for me, I think a team like Winnipeg or a team like. Then again, I don't know how well he'd get along with the Winnipeg locker room because I don't think he likes Mark Scheifele that much.
No, he does not.
No, he does not. I know LA's definitely checked in on him.
LA has, Edmonton I think has.
Jersey's definitely has, and I think Jersey has the second round pick that the Habs want for Evans.
No, I think New Jersey makes a lot of sense again because where you're at center depth wise right now.
New Jersey has multiple seconds too, don't they?
Yeah, they have 3 seconds, so they have a second round pick to spare if they wanted to get Jake Evans. I mean, Joel Armia's out there too. I mean, I've heard teams try to get the package deal to upgrade their penalty kill.
Right. No, and that's where Hughes would want the first round pick. And again, I don't necessarily blame him there because again, you're getting one of the best penalty killing duos in the league. Bringing in Armia and Jake Evans.
So I got a question for you. With the injury to Kirby Dach, right? Like, does that change? Like what they do, and now they're winning again. Does that change what they do? Do you think Evans is actually going to go?
Right. No, it's tough, right? And we're winning right now, Monday night as we're recording this, 3-0.
The Sabres.
Yeah, it's odd. The injury to Kirby Dach, I first of all, I don't think is going to be as impactful as I think a lot of people might think. Owen Beck slotted into that second line center role and been fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think obviously he's not a second line center.
No.
But he's been great there, and I think he's staying in the NHL for the rest of his career. I think, once the dust settles and we get a second line center, he's probably going to take the Dvorak spot because he is not coming back after this year. I'd rather slam my head in the door. But no, it is right. Because if we win tonight, we're all of a sudden I think a point back out of the playoffs. So it's crazy. I do think in the end he does get moved because I think knowing how Kent Hughes does business, he's not going to let an asset like that walk because he's not re-signing. I think the last I heard he wanted 5 years at $4 million, which is just too much time for someone his age and with what we got coming behind him. So I do think he does get moved. We'll just have to see where and what the return is. But again, knowing Kent Hughes, it's probably going to be something pretty nice. I have all the faith in the world and the guys at the top of the organization right now.
I think New Jersey does make a lot of sense for them, especially with how many second-round picks. New Jersey, maybe even Washington too. And Edmonton's a team that's been struggling on the kill as well. I think they're somewhere in the bottom 10 if I remember correctly. But that's I think Edmonton maybe having a guy in their bottom six like Jake Evans could be real beneficial, especially with that PK. If I remember correctly, Edmonton's PK wasn't all that good last year, too, if I remember. So they might want to.
But it got better.
It did. It did. What about you, Eric? What do you think?
Well, I think for like you guys said, like I think the usual suspect, like Toronto needs a 3C, so maybe Toronto. Washington needs a 3C, so maybe Washington. New Jersey also. One team though, I don't know why I'm thinking, but Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, I think could use Jake Evans. He could be 3C, he could be 4C, just a little bit of extra depth on that team. Help, like Nordy said, help on the penalty kill. I think that would be a good fit. And like I was just checking now, Tampa Bay has 2 second-round picks. So if all it's gonna take is a second for Jake Evans, they got multiple seconds also. And yeah, I think Tampa would be a really good fit, especially the way they're playing now. If they could get a guy like Evans going into the playoffs, it could be dangerous again, man.
And then that's going to be definitely one of the names I think that may end up leading to an overpay for sure. So let's move to the fifth name and final name we're going to go over tonight on the big board of Frank Seravellis, Riley Smith. Name that was mentioned earlier in the stream. Second game in a row he's being held out for trade purposes. He looks like a pretty much lock to be moved. 33 years old, winger on the Rangers, 58 games played this year, 10 goals, 29 assists. Another pending free agent, only making $3.75 million, I believe. I'll put this one on you, Eric, to start. What do you think would make some good sense for Mr. Riley Smith?
You know what actually might make some sense to me is Columbus.
Honestly, I agree with that.
Columbus is a good young team, and look, like I think that they're not looking to make a big splash this year because I think they're just like, you know what, they're just gonna run with what they got, like, and see where it gets them. But like a guy like Riley Smith would be like a nice low cost because he's not gonna fetch you like a big haul or anything. Riley Smith.
No.
So I think a guy like that, with the experience that he has, going to 2 finals with Vegas, winning 1 cup, I think he'll bring that like veteran leadership, that like that pedigree into that locker room with a bunch of young guys, and I think Columbus makes a lot of sense. Who knows? Like I said before, with Evans, maybe Tampa too. Tampa might make a little bit of sense to bolster their middle 6, bottom 6. Maybe Los Angeles, I don't know, depending. Florida, a couple decent spots, but for me, Columbus kind of makes the most sense.
I like that pick. I look at teams that could potentially use winger help. I look at Minnesota again because how banged up they are. I feel like especially a guy like Riley Smith could add a good scoring spark for them. A good change of scenery could help them. We all know he's not going to fetch a lot. 33 years of age at this point. His best years are clearly behind him. This isn't the Riley Smith you saw in Vegas and Florida. So this is a guy I feel like that would be a good slot, maybe the third line winger spot for a team like Minnesota, maybe even temporarily in the second line until the team gets a little healthy again. But I like Minnesota possibly. Washington, another team that if they want to add a little bit more, as I mentioned earlier, they're not really trying to rattle up the chemistry of the team. But I think a small add like Riley Smith could be beneficial. Maybe even a Tampa Bay. Like they've been red hot lately. I think adding some winger depth to a team like that doesn't have the depth that they quite used to have. Because let's be honest, as good as Tampa's been, I don't think this is the strongest Tampa team that they've had in recent memory. Vasilevsky's been playing out of his mind, and the top 6 is still really good. But there's one thing that's different from this Tampa team to prior ones. They're not quite as deep as they used to be. So I think a Riley Smith could be a good add for a team like that as well. Just don't overpay like you did for a certain player that you gave up a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth for.
Yeah, Tanner Janot, not good. Not a good trade. That one's going to bite.
No, not at all.
I think it still is. I mean, they did get J.J. Moser back in the Sergachev trade, so but that was good for them. Yeah, I like Tampa. I like Columbus for the Riley Smith. I think Bjorkstrand could go back there as well, potentially for the right price. Vegas, obviously, Dallas, Florida. I think, Washington. Those are all good plays for Riley Smith. I think every team that's been named, I think just what he brings to the team. I especially I think to be honest, I think I could see Riley Smith going back to Vegas just because just because like he had success there, good bottom pair guy, good bottom six guy for them. It just makes a lot of sense. We'll see if that one happens, but all the picks and all the fits are great for Riley Smith.
Oh yeah, the familiarity factor with Vegas is definitely big on this.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts you guys might want to bring up, or a team or a name you might want to mention before we move on to our final subject of the night? All right. So with that being said, the last thing we wanted to mention, so the biggest trade I think we can all agree on up to this point was the big move that happened with Carolina, Colorado, and Chicago. That was part of the big Necas, Taylor Hall, Mikko Rantanen swap. So here we are a couple weeks later, and Marty Necas has absolutely thrived in Colorado. He's been balls to the walls. He's right around a point per game, maybe just a tad under. He's been playing great hockey with being on the same line with Nathan McKinnon. I feel like that'll elevate almost anyone. But Marty Necas looks like he's found a home in Colorado. Meanwhile, on the other hand of things, Mikko Rantanen has struggled a little bit. He's not quite putting up the numbers that we expected him to put up from this trade. I think if you asked anyone before this trade happened on paper, Mikko Rantanen was probably the best name pointed to it if I had to make my guess. Now to the point that there's even rumors that he could get flipped again now. I have a feeling he ends up staying. Carolina shouldn't sell on this guy, especially where they are in the standings. They're right in the midst of a potential cup run. But looking back at it now, do you guys think it's too early to judge this trade? Do you think this is something that could be a worry for Carolina down the line? Do you think Colorado hit a home run, or should we even give this a little more time before we really go too deep into it?
I mean, for me, I look at it this way. Rantanen played his best game against Buffalo. He's definitely struggled. But if I'm Eric Tulsky, I went big. I've offered him somewhere in the 12 to 14 range. Some say 12-5. I heard. Some say 12-6. Some say it's over 13. Who knows? You've made the pitch. The offer went out. Ownership's behind it, considering the owner. But if this really went back to the summer and you were doing your due diligence, you probably could have figured that he wasn't going to fit into the way you were playing. I'm just saying that, you look at Mikko Rantanen and the way he plays, he's an up-tempo player. He likes to play with speed. He was great in Colorado. Carolina doesn't play that system, and that's why he's struggling. And sometimes he's not noticeable at night. He's got a lot to weigh. He just got traded. It's a shock of a trade. If he doesn't stay, he doesn't stay. Now, if I'm Carolina, I want to take a run at the Cup. I'd probably keep him, even if I know he's not staying. Maybe, and I still have more runway to work with, even though he's not signed. If I could get something for him, I'm not going to get the return I gave away for. But everybody talked about, now I want to just say this. Everybody talked about them needing a goal scorer and a potential star and a superstar to help them put them over the edge. Well, Marty Necas was becoming that.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to get rid of him because they wanted to get rid of him last year because he was vocal that he didn't want to play. Well, he got put in the top 6 and all he did was shine. And he's shining in Colorado. And I think that was the player that they had. And I'm not sure they needed to make this move. And look, I'm not going to – the jury's still out on the trade, but it's easy to judge it early. And Colorado's clearly the winner on this. But if Rantanen can get his game together and help Carolina in a run – and maybe stay, good on him. I'm not sure. I mean, unless a team really blows them out of the water, like I'll say this again. You revisit it. You talk to Vancouver. You have to get like an Elias Pettersson or a Cousins or something like that back in a trade. Then if you're not going to get that, you got to just keep them.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. Nordy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to really make a final judgment on this, but yeah, I mean, I'm very happy for Marty Necas. I think he needed that change of scenery, and I mean, we'll see what Carolina does. I mean, it sounds like Rantanen's going to test free agency. So. I mean, at the end of the day, if the Carolina Hurricanes end up winning a Stanley Cup, who cares? But if they don't and he ends up walking for nothing, I mean, at that point, then the GM there is going to be on the hot seat because now you've lost Necas and Rantanen. Like what do you do from there? So it's
and that's the big thing that doesn't get talked about enough in this. Like Carolina is a cup contender this year.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
But if he doesn't re-sign, and you're playing a risky game here, I think a lot of this had to do that him and Aho will both finish. And I think that Aho was probably a big part of trying to bring him here to convince him to stay. And maybe it still does work. Who knows? I mean, the offseason's still months away. So I don't think he's going to sign before the deadline. So obviously he won't sign during the season. But you look at this big picture and it makes you wonder if they don't end up re-signing him. This is going to be something that is looked at for quite some time because it was a hassle to get Marty Necas to come back. And as Jim mentioned, he has done nothing but excel in the top 6 this year. At one point, he led the league in points, I think, after like 2 months or something like that. Now, he did fizzle back a little bit, but he was still, I think, in the top 20 when he was moved. It's not like he was playing bad. But the crazy thing about this is all the work you tried to do to potentially either appease him and move him, and then you eventually signed him to that 2-year deal, which made you kind of feel like it was a long-term rental, because I don't think he was going to stay after that deal. I think he just wanted to hit UFA level. So 2 years would have brought him there, and it gave him the opportunity to play in the top 6 with all the losses that Carolina had, especially losing Teravainen, obviously KK not being the top 6 guy that they had, and some of the losses they had in the back end with Pesce and Brady Shea. But you look at Carolina right now, this is big. This is really big because if you don't bring him back, there's going to be a lot of question marks of why you made this without a sign and trade. So we'll see. This is going to be interesting. I think Colorado made out very well. They avoided the headache of the potential long-term discussions with him. I do think Rantanen is still a really good player, but it also makes you wonder how much of a product of Nathan McKinnon he may have been. Don't get me wrong. I still think, like I said, he's a really good player, but it also, again, makes you wonder how much did Nathan McKinnon have to play in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, to me, for this, I think you look at it, I think the whole negotiation was weird. He wasn't going to have trade discussion or contract discussions during the year. But it's like, oh, well, he lowballed them. And they want to have this internal cap, even with the salary cap going up. Well, you can't really do that. I know you have to pay Kel McCarr needs a new deal, and all these guys are going to need new deals. And I know you don't want to make the Toronto Maple Leaf mistake, but in 3 years when the cap's at $115 million, $14 million isn't going to look that bad on your cap. And to me, I think Nathan McKinnon be okay being the second highest paid guy on the team if they're winning. Sure. To me, but he makes guys better, and that's what he is. And Marty Necas is doing well. And if Colorado extends Marty Necas, they only have to sign him to $9 million. So it's a win-win for them. Again, we'll see if he tests free agency or not, but I think it's a great trade. Look, we'll see what happens with Rantanen, but right now Colorado's got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Eric?
No, look, Carolina, they took a chance. At the end of the day, they took a chance. They thought Rantanen was the better player than Necas, and they were willing to take 1 year of Rantanen over 2 years of Necas. And look, at the end of the day, you're not gonna get if you trade him now before the deadline, you're not gonna recoup what you lost. So, in my opinion, then at that point, like I said before earlier in this episode, swing for the fences. Go get yourself somebody else. Go get yourself that 2C, and go for and have a legit shot at the cup, because I think they have a good enough team. And look, eventually things will click. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when he was traded to Carolina, they were on a road trip, so he didn't even have a time to get settled in. And it takes time. He's got to learn a new system. He's got. Because look, personally, I was at the Habs game against Carolina, and the whole team just looked completely disoriented. They just didn't look like Carolina. They really didn't. But now it seems like maybe they're turning it around. So, it takes time when you add a new player to get comfortable, to learn the new system. And so like I said, if I'm Carolina, I'm doubling down and I'm going for the home run. Go get yourself a 2C. Somehow figure it out, make the money work, but bring in somebody. Because at least at the end of the day, worst case scenario, if he walks, but if you could at least if you could win the cup or at least make it to the finals, then maybe, maybe he decides to stay. And maybe that's going to be the deciding factor. But I think the way they're constructed right now at center, I don't know if it's going to be, I think it's going to be the same old story, even with Rantanen. It's probably going to be a second round exit. They need to upgrade that 2C. And if you want any chance of signing him in the offseason, you got to bring in a legit player.
Lou Lamoriello, send them Brock Nelson.
Yeah. Somebody, anybody, man.
Anybody. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. We'll see.
But anyone else have any closing thoughts on this before we wrap things up?
I'm curious what's going to happen with Brad Marchand. I'm honestly really curious.
I think he's injured past the deadline, so
I don't think he gets moved.
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but again, there was a 3-year deal, then all of a sudden it didn't happen. So I think Brendan Carlo is going to get moved, though.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I saw it today. I think the Flames and the Bruins talks kind of heated up a little bit.
I wonder who boss would be interested from Calgary. It would probably have to be a prospect because the Bruins prospect pool is a barren wasteland. But
yeah, probably be prospect pick something like that.
They gotta add some youth to that team because they have absolutely nothing right now.
No.
We'll see where that goes. Before we wrap things up, one question off topic, Jim. The whole world has been talking about this. What do you think about that John Cena heel turn?
Loved it. I go back. Everybody knows I'm a big wrestling guy. I loved it. I thought it was great. Like Hogan in '96, Andre before that. I mean, I was too young for Andre, but I remember I seen the footage. Michaels, Jannetty, the double turn at WrestleMania 13. Like, world is talking about it.
That was legendary.
That was great. I mean, look, we've been clamoring for it for years. We're finally going to have it. Apparently, it was supposed to happen during Rock Cena, like all the years ago.
2012, yeah. They had the new theme and everything. He had no tire and ready to go.
Yeah, it was ready to go. I'm loving it. I'm going to see what this faction's all about. I can't wait to see it in action. Apparently, Punk cut this fire pipe bomb tonight, so I got to watch that.
I got to keep that too.
I got to watch that. But I loved it. Great decision. Nobody saw it coming. Epic moment, and here we are. Just a cinema. Just sit back and just throw your hands up because you're
Triple
watching.
H, Booker of the Year.
Absolutely. Just give it to him every year.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. So with that being said, that's going to wrap things up tonight. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Everyone, give him a follow at Jim Biringer. His @ is the same as his name outside the space. Give them a follow. Also, Full Press NHL, the RG Media, and NHLRumors.com. Fantastic content there. If you want to check it out, give them a follow, give them a like, subscribe, whole 9 yards there. But with that being said, that's going to do it. Eric, also, thank you for coming in on short notice to fill in. I appreciate it. Nordy, as always, thank you for coming on as well as one of my awesome co-hosts. But with that being said, that's going to wrap things up. Thank you all for tuning in to another awesome episode of the Pucking Around podcast. Everyone take care. We'll see you next week. Actually, we're going to have a special deadline episode on Wednesday, so you might want to keep track for that. We'll be going over some more of these trades, but we'll go a little more in depth about that then. But next Pucking Around episode 60. See you next Tuesday. No pun intended with that. And everyone, take care, everyone. We look forward to going over the trades. Have a good one.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, give a thumbs up, leave a comment, and please share this video.